Welcome to the PROUST Questionnaire.
35 questions giving us insight into what makes creative people tick. Hey, Uli.
How are you, Caroline?
I'm good. Tell me about Etgar Keret. This is one I'm heartbroken about because I couldn't join you for the interview. Amazing, very important writer. Tell me a little bit more about him.
I know, and actually, heartbreak is one of his themes.
Not my heartbreak.
No, generally heartbreak. And he comes from Israel, but is really a globally recognized writer, known for short stories and a very moving memoir, My 7 Happy Years. And he writes these tiny stories, some of it microfiction, I guess, very, very short stories about the absurdity of daily life in today's Israel.
Wow.
And like some of the great writers, Kafka, Pynchon, etc., in the tradition, he says, what is absurd about life is how we're living our lives, not my stories in it.
Right.
So there's something really great to read these strange... the bus driver who mistook himself for God, things like that, and look at absurdity as a tool to understand how reality has been set up and presented as if it's natural to us.
Right, when often it's, in fact, anything
exactly.
but.
And so we were really lucky because Etgar was here in the United States for a bit for a book tour, and he had time right before he was going to the airport, so I was able to talk to him for an hour.
Oh, thrilled that you spoke to him and really can't wait for this
Really excited, yes. So now we're here. So first of all, Etgar, thank you so much for being on the PROUST Questionnaire.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
So Proust found this questionnaire when he was 15 years old, and then he responded to it, and then he responded to it again when he was 16, and then again in his 20s, which means that there are no right answers, and we may have you back later on if you don't like any of your answers.
Okay, and yeah, in a few years I'll give totally different answers, I'm sure.
I'm sure, exactly. First question is, what is your idea of perfect happiness?
I imagine something as like kind of a zero gravity and zero friction, like, floating in space. I think that the closest I got to it was playing with my child, or writing a story, or smoking good pot.
Or maybe all of the above at once.
Yeah, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to play with your child while writing a good story when you're really stoned.
Okay. What is your greatest fear?
Since I was a child, I had this fear that I'll be I suffer some kind of violence from people who will not be passionate to hurt me, like dying, stoning, or something like that. That there will be some kind of a technocratic death. I wasn't afraid that somebody who hates me will stab me, but just people who kind of go through the motions.
But this is before you knew who Kafka was.
Yes.
There's so many stories about that, of people dispassionately, slowly killing somebody.
It's. I think that kind of bureaucracy and violence. The combination is always ugly.
Yeah. What is the trait, characteristic you most deplore in yourself?
Wow, there's so many. I always see myself as somebody who's too lazy and too anxious. And with me, it's like I think that I always have this kind of defensive stance. I've been living in the same apartment for 26 years because I'm afraid of moving. All my life I actually lived in 4 apartments, and I see myself as kind of like Immanuel Kant, only without the brains. So I think that, let's say, moving an apartment is something that scares the hell out of me.
What is the trait you most deplore in others?
Not seeing the other, a lack of empathy.
Mm-hmm. Which living person do you most admire?
Wow, I'm very bad at admiring people. There are people that I like and people that I dislike, but admiring for me is this kind of looking up to someone, and it's as if like I don't have this feature. I can look at people and say, oh, he's a nice guy or he's a good guy, but there isn't this kind of person that I look at it and I say, oh, I would want to be like him.
Right. Okay. No. Yeah. There's admiration of someone who's superior in a way. That's not.
Yeah. It's I think that it's like kind of when I look at people, it's like apples and oranges. It's not like I say, oh, he's smarter and he's faster. It's like kind of a package deal.
Right.
And I say, okay, he's this guy, and I cannot admire him because I know that I'll never be him, you know. So I can say I like to spend time with this person,
right?
But it doesn't get any further than that.
Right. What is your greatest extravagance? Something you allow yourself to do or have or be?
I'm not sure I have one. I like talking to my rabbit. I don't know, does it count as an extravagance? Like we have long conversations.
Your rabbit.
Yeah, I have a rabbit, and I really like.
Not your rabbi.
And not my rabbi.
I thought you were.
No, and it's funny. Like we have a very kind of a close relationship. It's basically after getting the rabbit, I discovered that I was allergic to rabbits. Oh. So it's kind of this huge sacrifice having him because I have to take all these antihistamines, you know. But he's well worth it. You know, I never went to therapy, but I think that he's the closest to a therapist that I've ever had.
What is your current state of mind?
A tired one. An exhausted one. I just finished like a 2 weeks reading tour, and I think that I love the events and I love speaking on stage, but I'm very, very bad at traveling, and you know, and everything kind of fills me with anxiety. So I think that whenever I don't have to speak or give an interview, I kind of get into this hibernate mode, you know. I kind of try to use as little battery as I can.
Right. What do you consider the most overrated virtue?
Success. I think that there is something about success that, for me, like success is totally not connected to happiness or to self-fulfillment or to this idea of belonging. So I think that many people want to succeed, and I honestly don't understand why. You know, I think that when I teach writing, many people want to write a successful book, and I think that, you know, if you don't write what you're most passionate about, then this success is kind of meaningless. You know, you just got there, but got there with what, or who exactly got there? It's not you.
Yeah, the other day you talked about 2 weeks ago when I heard you, and you said there has to be a kind of urgency in writing, that you need to want to tell the story. If the motivation is maybe to succeed as a writer, that's...
Yeah, but for example, I think that in the US they have this kind of term, the Great American Novel. And like, I would say, who wants to write the Great American Novel? I mean, you want to write your novel, and I think that that this idea of kind of looking at the novel as something that has a purpose, you know, that it's something that can be leveraged, and I think that the moment that you think about writing this way, for me, it immediately castrates me. You know, it's really like, I say, oh, what is the most important topic? What should be said? And you lose all your authenticity and your ability to connect to the topics that you write about. You know, I think I was in China, and when I did the Q&As, and a Chinese writer asked me to share with the audience how I wrote a story of mine called Hemorrhoids. And I said to him, well, you know that in the year of 86 there was a drought in the southern part of Israel, and farmers could not grow the crops. And then I said, no, I'm just kidding. I wrote it because I have hemorrhoids, So, so I think that when you have a hemorrhoid, it bothers you, and it's in your mind all the time, and you can't escape it. And there is something about writing that you share your pain and your frustration with other people. And this is for me what writing is all about. It's kind of this kind of uncontrollable shout.
Right.
And the moment that people say to you, how about you shout something important that will have an impact, then it kind of a priori make your shout kind of fake.
Yeah, interesting. That's success. On what occasions do you lie?
I think I lie all the time. I'm not conscious of my lies, but one thing that is sure, I kind of differentiate between lies. I think that there are selfish lies and selfless lies, and empathic lies, and for me, when I think about lies, I basically try not to be a nasty person. So the moment that it's not about nastiness, then if like we had an appointment and I wait for you for 20 minutes and you say, oh my God, I'm sorry. And I say, no, I just came here. Then I don't feel that I'm doing a bad thing, even if I'm not saying the truth. So I think that many times I wouldn't even register it. Like I wouldn't say, oh, now I'm going to say something that is not true.
Okay.
It's just, for me, like the subtext saying, everything's okay, you're a nice guy.
Yeah.
Don't worry. and the factual, the facts that I'm sharing with you seem to be, to me, less important. I think that kind of advocating honesty at any price, I think that there is something, first and foremost, there is something very kind of lazy about it. We talk a lot about free choice. So the moment that you say, I'll never lie, then you use this, you make life easy. You don't employ your judgment. You become like this totalitarian regime of telling the truth, kind of makes your life easier, and you kind of go on a kind of automatic pilot. It doesn't make you look at somebody and try to feel how they're experiencing a situation. I don't see in it something noble.
What do you most dislike about your appearance?
The fact that I'm very hairy. I think
it comes up in your stories a couple times. Actually.
Yeah. It's I must say
That's
that
what your wife says is the one thing you gave to your son.
Yeah.
A lot of hair.
Yeah, actually, my son is also bothered by it. I think it's. I think that there's something about hairiness that kind of makes me feel more like an animal, and I think that there is something like in kind of me aspiring to be human, that I want to transcend being an animal, even though I love animals. And I must say that due to my hairiness, I've gained the admiration of my rabbit, because my rabbit he really treats me as kind of the leader of the pack, because I'm the biggest rabbit he ever met. I'm very hairy and I have big front teeth, so it doesn't matter where I sit in the living room, he will always sit by my side. While my wife, that is not hairy and doesn't have big front teeth, like he sees in her a totally different species.
That's nice. Which living person do you most despise?
Well, I said before that I don't really admire people, but
right.
I don't think that I kind of despise people. I think I can be very scared or intimidated by people. I think that people like, let's say, Donald Trump or Benjamin Netanyahu or Boris Johnson, there are people who scare me. All those kind of guys that are kind of like reality shows stars, those kind of guys that would win a Survivor competition or a Big Brother competition.
Right.
Because I think there is something about them that is kind of sociopathic and totally selfish and kind of, like, for example, they would feel all the time that something wrong is being done to them. So there's no symmetry. Like they can do something to somebody else and not understand what's his problem. If the same thing would be done to them, they would think that the most horrible thing has been done to them.
Yeah.
And I think that there is something about this that it scares me, not in the sense that I say, oh, they're going to kill me. But it for me, it's kind of a reality check, because when you talk to people like that, you say, oh, maybe I got the word wrong or my ethics wrong, because they seem to be so convinced in their point of views.
These kind of wounded narcissists, extreme narcissists.
Yes, and these kind of people that basically have this kind of feeling that there is only one narrative, that anything that kind of is not their narrative is basically wrong.
Right. What is the quality you most like in a man?
In a man, like, not a woman?
Biological man. The next one is a woman. This is a very 19th century question they don't have.
Like in a man. Well, I think that what I like in a man is our simplicity. I think that, let's say, compared to women, then, men like kind of want to win, to lead the pack, to have sex, to be admired. And it kind of ends with that. And I actually think that with women, it's much more complicated.
So what's the quality you most like in a woman?
First of all, is that most of them aren't hairy. But maybe you, again, and what I'm saying is not always true, but the lack of aggression, the fact that that they are not as aggressive and violent as men. Sometimes they are, but as a default, at least I know the stereotype. I admire people who succeed not being aggressive. I'm aggressive, and I totally dislike my aggressiveness, and I understand that it totally comes from fear and some kind of inability to deal with some situations, and I would really would like to be less aggressive.
Which words or phrases do you most overuse?
Allegedly.
And
I like also to, and I don't like, but I say that although. And I think that the reasons that I use them a lot is because I think that there is no Hebrew equivalent to them. Right. So whenever I use them, I kind of say, "Oh my God, I'm actually speaking English."
You talked about another word the other week in one of your stories. Actually. Right. We said actually.
Yeah.
It's because of this or because of that, and you said that word actually does something by not doing anything.
Yeah, I think that whenever you have those words that kind of have a space in a sentence, but you cannot, they have no physical existence. You cannot see them.
Right.
Then there's something about it that it's like they feel kind of magical to me. Like you say, I can say it and I can not say it.
Right. Actually, what I think.
Actually, yeah, allegedly.
You're buying space or something. You're buying some time.
Yeah, it's kind of, for me, it's this kind of a alchemy, because I take nothing and I turn it into semi-something.
Right, right, and it's not clear, right? Who or what is the greatest love of your life?
Wow, I think they have many loves. I love my family, and I'm not only speaking about my wife and child. I love my mother, my brother. I love writing. I love what I perceive as humanity. I love all those kind of like this kind of fragile ambiguity, unexpected ambiguity. I love human weakness when it doesn't lead to ugly things. This kind of the ability to cry and to break up and to kind of be shattered, and at the same time to collect yourself together. But I think I love vulnerability. When I was a child, I really liked superhero comics. And the weaker the superhero was, the more I liked him. It's like I couldn't read like comics of Superman. he was too strong for me.
Right. And so you like the backstory part? Because they always come out of some kind of overcoming, some kind of weakness, right? Or
Yeah, but I think that you know that let's say with Superman it was his kryptonite,
right.
and you say like the rest of the time like he was stopping criminals, and you say it's not a fair fight, like they just shoot at him and the bullets bounce off. So I really always like those kind of Batman or Daredevil or those people that that really didn't have any superpower, just some kind of perceived themselves as superhero.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm very much attracted to weaknesses. I think that when I was younger and I was dating, then anything that would kind of project fragility would attract me. Like I would be attracted to girls who wear glasses, for example, which basically says that they don't see well, but it was this kind of things that would automatically attract me.
When and where were you happiest?
I think that my happiest moments were always either at my home or at my parents' apartment, and they were always kind of very trivial. I don't know. I was sitting in the balcony and eating a watermelon and talking to my rabbit. It's funny because as a writer I travel a lot, and I like traveling, and I have a lot of experiences, and I really like performing, and I really like the dialogues that you have, like we're having now. But in the bottom line, I think that I'm kind of the happiest when I'm in my safe zone. And actually when I think about it, I think maybe I'm the happiest when I write.
And you write at home.
And I write at home. It's difficult for me to write in any other place.
Yeah. Which talent would you most like to have?
Well, can I? Okay, it's the US. Nobody knows me, but I always had this fantasy that I will crop poops that will be totally dry, and you won't have to clean your butt after
like
them.
A rabbit.
Like a rabbit.
That's
yeah.
what rabbits do. Little droppings that you can just sweep up.
Yes, it's totally dry, and I don't know because one of the things that I hate the most is wiping my ass. I think it's like second to being hairy. It's those kind of things that they make you feel your physicality.
Your physicality. So if you were a rabbit, you could just hop on. No mess.
Yeah, maybe I'm a reincarnation of a rabbit that still kind of mourns the fact that I have to wipe my ass.
Right. If you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be? You may want to be a rabbit, but you get something else.
One thing about myself, wow. I would like to be less anxious. I think that many times the fact that I'm scared kind of stops me from having new experiences.
You travel a lot, though, so in some ways a lot of people get very anxious when they travel. So you get through it.
But I get through it. But I think that that many times I will go to a place and if I don't meet somebody, or I don't know, I kind of have this interaction, I could go to a city that I've never been in and kind of, not go out and see the city. And I would say to myself, I'm too tired, or, what's the point? I don't like touristic places. But I think that the bottom line of it is that there is some kind of fear in me, that I want to feel protected.
Right. What do you consider your greatest achievement?
Wow, I never kind of look at life as made out of achievements, I think that I would like to be a better person, and so I can't take credit for that. The truth is that I don't find anything that I've ever did kind of that I can count it as an achievement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some people don't think of life in this. You also don't think you think success is overrated. Does that make sense in connection to that? Yeah. If you were to die and come back as a person or a thing, what would it be?
Well, I think I've already been a rabbit in past life. I wouldn't want to be a rabbit, by the way. It's really, really scary. You know, actually, rabbits are very anxious animals. Maybe that's what we have in common. You know, my rabbit, all the time, he tries to be under something because he's afraid, I think, of vultures. You know, so he's under the sofa or under the chair. I wouldn't want to be a rabbit. I wouldn't want to live all my life under things. If I could come back, what would I want to be? I have these things that I communicate much better with children than with adults, you know. So if I could have been, if I could come back and be this kind of child again, it would be nice.
A child, yes.
Yeah.
That's nice. That's actually, I think, what the Buddha says.
Ah, yeah?
Actually, I think he reincarnated as a child, yes.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, that when I think about children...
The Buddha doesn't want to be reincarnated as the Buddha. To start again.
No, but the thing about children is that I really feel that, you know, that when I meet children, and I really like kind of hanging out with children, you know, by the way, which is something that is very problematic because I often, like, parents don't like the fact that I speak to children a lot. It kind of seems to sound like creepy.
Creepy, right?
But the thing about children is that when you get into, let's say, kindergarten, all the children seem to be very, very different. You know, there is something very individualistic about them.
Right.
And it's as if we go through a process that, you know, that when you go on a subway, people would always kind of look about the same because they were taught to hide their differences. And I think that what I miss about the childhood that is this kind of freedom to be yourself, which I now find in writing. When I write, you know, I can be a character, I can be, this character could be, I don't know, a sex-driven or greedy or chauvinist or aggressive, and I can just be that because it's in fiction. But when I was a child, I didn't need to write to be that. I was just who I was.
Or many different things also.
Many contradictory things.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's actually, when you just said that, I thought whether the years of being a teenager are so complicated because you're supposed to start fitting into a box, but there's now conflict because you're still so many different things.
Yeah, I see it with my son who's 14 years old, that many times he's grown up enough to understand what he's supposed to do, but he still have a strong memory of him not doing what he was supposed to do.
Right.
And he's kind of ripped between the two because kind of the superego says to him, you know, considering your age, you should do that. But there is something in him saying, you know, but I remember so many times that there were things that I was supposed to do and I didn't do. I remember the time when I wanted to take a poop, I didn't even go to the restroom, you know. So it's kind of feeling, I think, that you lose your liberties and you lose your freedom.
Yeah.
And that's something that I kind of miss.
Well, and you trade it in, like you said, for the superego or your sublimate or for reasoning, for, we hope, enlightenment. So you use reason, but you give up on impulses, instincts, desires. You give up on a lot of other things.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's like, you know, children, if they like you, they'll always touch you. And as an adult, you know, I think that, you know, many times I see people, I like them, I want to touch them, but I know it will be... You
can't do that, right?
Yeah, it will be seen as something awkward. You know, I feel it a lot with my students. You know, sometimes, let's say, a student reads a story.
Right.
And it's really good. And I feel like going, I don't know, kissing him on the forehead or petting his hair or doing something like that. And I say, you know, I know that I have tenure, but they're going to throw me out of university anyway. So I just say, oh, that was very good, Eddie. I really liked your story.
The other thing you can do as a child, they tell you, I don't like you, or I like you. Whereas adults, we don't do that. We don't go around usually, most of us, and say, children, when they don't like somebody or something, they say, I don't like this, or I don't like you.
So you know that when my son was young, like I think he was like 5 years old, our next door neighbor came, and he looked at her and he said, wow, you're old. and old in Hebrew sounds a little bit like a neighbor, because skena and chena, it sounds the same. So she said, "What did you say?" And I said, he said that you're a neighbor. And my son said, no, I said that you're old. And then neighbor said, yeah, I feel old. And there was something about this moment that I thought to myself, why was I lying? He was saying something that was factually true,
right,
which she accepts, but this kind of anxiety, this social kind of, I was protecting the system.
Both him and her, and
they just communicated,
Right.
and I was there in the middle kind of trying to disrupt it and create something that was dishonest and not authentic.
Right. That's nice. Where would you most like to live?
In my apartment. I've been living in it for 26 years. You know that I have to move. It kills me.
You do. Really?
Because it changed the municipal laws. So the building next to us, they're going to tear it down and build kind of a skyscraper. And I work at home, and it's like 4 meters from my window.
So you have to.
And so I'll have to move somewhere. So I said to myself, I don't know, maybe I'll take advantage of that and move a continent or something, because
Might as well move.
because all the time I say I would never leave Israel, but my subtext is I will never leave my apartment. So I say if I leave my apartment, I should I should ask myself, what do I think about staying in my country?
Move to California. They're building a building next to yours, right? That's a good reason. What is your most treasured possession?
So it's funny that once when I was young, I was in a bar, and all my friends were already left the bar, and I went to the restrooms. And when I was about to leave, this really, really big, scary guy who looked like human fridge, he grabbed me by the arm, and he says, "Come and have a drink with me." And I said, no, I had enough, I'm going home. He said, "Have a drink with me." And I said, okay. And I sat next to this guy, and we had a drink, and he talked to me about his life. And what he told me was that he has the best work in the world, because he's a repossessor. And he said, some people like work in the office, but with me, every time I go to a different place, I enter places, intimate spaces, nobody can say no to me. And he says that whenever he goes to people's apartment and repossesses, he plays this game with himself to try and find out what's the most precious thing for them. So he says, that you can go to people's house and take their jewelry, the most expensive thing, and they don't care, but then you take their jazz records or something and you see them quiver, And being a little bit drunk at that moment, I said to him, if you go to my place, you can take everything, and I wouldn't mind. And he said, yeah, that's what most people think. So I got home really, really drunk, and I thought to myself, oh my God, he's right. There must be something that, that I wouldn't want people to take away from me. And I said to myself, I have to figure out what this thing is and hide it, which is kind of a drunken thought,
Yeah.
And I've been kind of going through my stuff, and I don't care about books, I don't care about clothes, I don't care about anything, and at the point I couldn't find anything, and I couldn't go to sleep because I was full of adrenaline. And I sat down and I wrote a story about a repossessor that comes to a writer's home to repossess his writing talent. And I thought, that if there's anything I would be afraid that somebody will take from me, would be my ability to write. Not because, I don't know, I want to, it's like, it's a gift or something, but it's just that it's the only way I know to cope with life. And if they take it away from me, then, I would just kind of break down and cry.
And then you've turned this into a story, the Repo Man story. What do you regard the lowest depth of misery?
I think that there is this sentence of Faulkner, between nothing and grief. I would always choose grief, and I think that the lowest you can get is when you reach nothing, when you really, really don't care. Apathy for me is the most scary thing. I rather feel the greatest anxieties and not feel anything at all.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite occupation? Which I think sometimes means also if you would be doing something else, unless you.
Yeah, okay. It's not.
You could be saying.
No, it could like I could say the Israeli occupation is my favorite occupation.
I think that's what Proust had in mind.
My favorite occupation. Wow. Well, when all my life I wanted to be a elementary school teacher. I wanted to teach kind of 6 years old and 7 years old. But again, the kind of relationships that I have with children and their parents would probably complain.
Yeah, you corrupt the kids. What is your most marked characteristic? I think that means what do you think other people notice about you first?
That people always say about me that I'm a nice guy. And it's like they have this thing, he's a good guy, he's a nice guy. And it's funny because my subjective experience is that I'm not nice at all, And always when they say that, it's kind of like, I say, oh, no, they're not getting me. I'm kind of like, I'm just kind of scared and confused, and it's funny that many times I have these kind of feelings that the way that I perceive myself and the way that the world perceives me are very different. Because, for example, I always see myself as kind of a lazy underachiever.
Okay.
And many people say, oh, you're so prolific. And it's a strange thing because, let's say when you write, then I would say in a good day, I write 2 hours. So for me, I say, wow, 24 hours a day and you just write 2 hours, like you're really lazy. But I guess that other writers write even less.
Right, less. Yeah, you're also directing TV shows, you made movies, so you've done lots of other things. I think people see that. But right, if it's only 2 hours a day, what are you doing for 22 other hours?
Oh, no. So that's the thing that that I kind of, that I many times have this kind of feeling that I'm a bum.
Yeah.
It's like, I always, I walk my son to school. I try to walk him back from school. At some stage he says, "Daddy, you're arresting me."
I'm old enough now.
but the general feeling is that kind of that I'm using a lot of my time to do things that are not very pragmatic, and that kind of gives me the feeling that I'm a lazy underachiever. But when people talk to me, they say, "Oh, you're doing so much," and so there is something very, very confusing. I don't know if it is me or the other people who are getting it wrong.
Okay,
probably
right.
both of us.
What do you most value in your friends?
Persistence of friendship. My best friend is my friend since the age of 3. And there is something kind of very a priori about our friendship. It's like his political ideas are totally opposite to mine. I think his ethics are not the same as mine. His ambitions, he doesn't have any ambitions actually. Like he's a guy who made this exit when he was 32 and kind of like, tries to make money all the time just to pass time. But we see the world totally different, but there was something that was decided that we're friends and that we love each other and that we're loyal to each other, and you feel as if there's nothing that could threaten that. It's like he's my friend for 49 years. We had one fight when we were 11. I wasn't nice. I apologized. It was in the afternoon. I apologized that evening, and we never fought ever since.
That's nice. So the value is the commitment to the friendship.
Yes, and this idea that it's kind of that it's unquestionable. Is that it's like it's like the idea that we will not be friends. It's not there. So I'm saying that let's say if he's interested in something, then it becomes my interest. Yes. He's interested in a real estate investment. So I know a lot about real estate investment. And I made a series now about a real estate agent. I don't think I would have done it if not for him, but the moment because I like him, then it interests me. I have the same thing with my son. It's like my wife, she's very much against video games. And with me, like all the games that my son plays, I know them very well. I know the rules, I know the characters, because I see that they make him happy. So I'm interested in his happiness.
Right. It's not the main thing. That's nice. Yeah. Who are your favorite writers?
Well, I think my favorite writers are, I think favorite writers can change, but I think that the two writers that kind of gave me the ability to write or the legitimation to write, and both of them I've read during my compulsory army service when I was 18, which was really like the down point of my life, were Kafka and the Kurt Vonnegut. And I grew up in Israel where really the model of a writer was some kind of a secular prophet. Like the writers, people like the late Amos Oz or David Grossman or A.B. Yoshua, basically they had this stance of mentors, people who are better than the readers. And when I read Kafka, I suddenly thought, wow, maybe I can write too. I mean, this guy for sure is more fucked up than I am, And this idea of kind of a writer that kind of writes about his incompetence, that only have questions but can't offer any answers, I think it had a huge impact on me. And with Kurt Vonnegut, the first book of his that I've read was Slaughterhouse 5. Yeah. And this book that that it's basically both an autobiography and a sci-fi book. This ability to kind of slide between genres, to not to take form seriously, but at the same time talk about issues that were very, very serious and crucial, and to be moral without being moralistic, to be accessible, which is something that I truly appreciate. I think that, let's say Vonnegut and Kafka, I can easily tell the stories to a child, and he will be really interested in those stories. Well, for example, Proust stories, a Proust book, it's not something that it's just the text itself. It's this kind of thickness of text.
I was just thinking, though, it's interesting because Proust, there is a part that he's the master of the novel. He's considered the greatest novelist of the 20th century, etc. His sort of reign in France, he's really a deity. At the same time, he's, as the narrator, Marcel, and Marcel Proust, the novelist, and I'm really sorry Caroline isn't here because she knows all of this much better. They're kind of failures in a massive way. They're actually not grand society people. The whole point, he's looking in all the time. He's failing.
But I think that there is something about the story. Like it doesn't matter. Like I'm saying, the story exists in the text and in the form, and it's less, let's say, in the plot. And I think that I love this thing about, let's say, Kafka Metamorphosis, that you can tell it to a child, and and many of the Vonnegut stories basically have this kind of a clear fable-like plot that you add things on it, but in the bottom line, it's kind of it can be an oral tale or a bedtime story, if you transform it. And for me, I always admire a thick plot, a story that you can kind of grab and hold to.
Well, you have some of your fiction is very short, and it's a lot of plot for this short space, 2 or 3 pages, and a lot of things are happening. And what I always liked about your work, and then there are things that are happening, and you don't complete them, but in your head they keep on happening. So you open up sort of an action or something, and then in this small space of the story, it concludes in a certain way, but it still goes on.
Yeah, I think that, the way that I see a story is that you enter this kind of infinite space, and it's from all your 4 sides there are kind of many, many doors. And every time you say something, let's say the protagonist was tall, then you close the door because it cannot be short anymore. And then you say, and then he died, then you close the door, so he cannot leave anymore. And there is some wish when I write to pass what I feel, but at the same time to leave as many doors open. Because for me, like the difference between books and, let's say, filmmaking is that when you see a movie, you're passive. You can interpret the film in a different way, but you cannot imagine the voice of the character, or you can't imagine the pace of things. And when I write a story, I want to kind of co-direct this film with the reader. I want to leave the reader with as many choices as I can. It's funny. I have a story called Crazy Glue, and this story was adapted to quite a few short films. I think about 10, and those short films, the scope is between a romantic comedy to a horror movie. And the fact that, two people can read the same story, and one could say, "Oh, that's so funny," and the other say, "Oh my God," then I'm kind of happy about it. I'm saying, okay, the story has enough space that, let's say I talk about the relationships, and somebody can take his history of relationship and say, "Oh, this is so beautiful," and somebody can take his own personal experience and say, "Oh my God, it's horrible."
So it's kind of the ambiguity opens something up. It's not supposed to be two options versus one, which people, I think, misunderstand. It's not a contradiction, but you're saying you're opening up.
Yeah, it's like, I tell you, for example, let's say if I say to you now the word pain. So if you're into a BDSM, you could say, sexy,
Right.
And if you're me, you say, oh my God, no, please don't do it, And I think that when I write a story, I don't want to write pain. It's a bad thing. I want to say pain, and you take it, for wherever.
Right.
It communicates with you, because it's kind of this idea of a story being a dialogue between a text and yourself, and not some kind of a monologue that doesn't leave you the freedom to interpret things in a way that will let your personality come out.
But that gives you a very different place compared to those secular prophets in a way, because you're not giving guidance in a way of saying this is the path to take.
No, it's I think that it's the opposite of giving guidance. It's kind of maybe sharing a confusion.
Yeah.
And for me, I think that the confusion is very ethical. I think that the most horrible things done in history were done by people who were not confused.
Who have clarity. Oh yeah. The absolute clarity, that's probably the most dangerous, very dangerous thing. I don't know if it's the most, but a dangerous thing.
It is very dangerous. And I think that, let's say, I sometimes tend to see life as some kind of obsessive compulsive behavior. And for me, like, a good story is a slap to your face. Something that will make you ask, oh my God, where am I? What's going on? So if I can lead you somewhere that it will be like kind of an Escher painting, that you find yourself inside an oxymoron, then the things that were clear to you will look less clear, and it will make you kind of ask yourself a question. And if I can make you ask yourself a question about something that you thought that you knew before, I feel that I've committed some kind of ethical action.
So this story opens up a space that's already there, which is life. It doesn't create confusion. It just points to the fact that we tend to minimize or try to
suppress it,
right.
because I think that the need to suppress confusion is normal. I give you the most, simple example. It's like, when you go home, there is this same homeless person, that he sits, on the floor in the middle of the street. And basically, when you go next to him, it's binary. You have two options. You can ignore him, or you can give him $1. Now, this guy is a homeless person. He's not a $1-less person, Basically, you should say, maybe I should take him home, have a shower, sleep on my bench, It's like, but don't wake up the kids if you wake up in the middle of the night, because, they don't sleep well, and if you wake them up, they won't go back to bed. But this option, it's not even in your mind, because if it will be in your mind, you will be crazy. So you say, okay, I reduce this kind of reality. It's not that this guy needs $1. He needs a place to sleep. It's going to be really, really cold at night. But you don't even let yourself register that. And I think that the story can make you register that for the plain fact that it's fictitious. So I think that there are many things that kind of shut down automatically in me, in life, and that I can open them up in a story.
It's kind of beautiful, because when you just give this example of the homeless person, and you think it's absurd to take somebody home. But then I think a lot of your work is under this label of absurd literature because you're showing the absurdity that we've reduced a situation like this to two simple choices: give him $1 or don't give him $1. When you say the absurdity is actually that we walk past somebody and think giving him $1 is the right response or one response. There's so many other.
Or I could say that basically, like, the absurd option is actually the normal one.
The real one, right? Exactly. That's what I'm saying. You're
the
pointing
authentic
out
one, yeah.
that would be the authentic one.
And I'm saying, you know, for example, because I'm an anxious person, I have this kind of a pattern of behavior that I give money to beggars, but only if they don't approach me. And the moment that they come and say, give me $1, I will never give them $1.
There's a very famous little short story about false, like fake money in Baudelaire as a prose poem. Someone gives a beggar a button, and the beggar beats him up. And he really values and appreciates the beggar, of course, because he points out the whole absurdity of the system of giving somebody. The beggar pretends to be blind and sees this as not real money.
Yeah.
So the beggar actually responds like a real, authentic, full being.
Yeah,
He's
been cheated.
He should be grateful.
He's been cheated.
He's been cheated, right?
But you know what? At the same time, again, you know, there is this a poem by a Dutch poet about this kid that every time that he goes to school with his father, they pass next to a beggar, and the kid describes the beggar, and he says like everybody is anxious and they're hurrying. And he's in the best corner with the sun in his face. And the people who give him money, they bow in front of him like he's a king. And the people who do not give him money, you can feel that they feel kind of stressed with themselves. And he says, when I grow up, I want to become a beggar. So I think that this is this kind of a thought that art can give us, you know, that we can transcend this kind of a pragmatic reduction that kind of helps us survive, that, you know, that we are a little bit like kind of horses, that they put this thing on our eyes so we only go straight. Right. And when we read and write, we say, okay, you know, we're safe now. It's not really happening, so we can look and sideways.
Mm-hmm. What is your hero of fiction or film or an imagined person?
I always loved the Huckleberry Finn. I think that, you know, the idea of Huckleberry Finn being brought by an ethos that a slave is property, and at the same time helping a slave to escape. So he's kind of doing the right thing, but all the time feels that he'll go to hell for it, you know. So I think that there is something about this kind of character that it's very kind of Kantian in that sense that his instinct make him act compassionately, but at the same time he's ashamed of his compassion.
Amazing, yeah. Amazing. Great, that's a great figure, yeah. Which historical figure do you most identify with? It has to be somebody in the past.
I think Job, but mostly because of my hemorrhoids, you know.
Okay. He suffered a lot too. Okay. Who are your heroes in real life?
I think that if there is anything close to a hero in my real life, it's my older brother. And my older brother is this kind of he's a genius. He graduated from high school, did his final exams, and started studying when he was about 14. And he worked in this kind of a company, like a Nasdaq company, you know, that it's really huge, you know, and he had all those options that he had to kind of work for another kind of couple of years to have those options realized. And then like something like 4 months before he would get the options, he decided that he doesn't like his job and he wanted to leave it. And I said to him, you know, how about you just stay there for an extra 4 months and you'll get the money? And he said to me, I don't believe that you're giving me this advice. You're saying, wake up in the morning and do something that you don't like just because you get money, and he quit. And my brother is really like he's not rich in any way. I think he doesn't make a lot of money, and sometimes his life can be very, very difficult. But there is this kind of a sense of imposed integrity to him. You know, you said about children that they say to people, "I don't like you." Mm. There is something about him that he can't move away from what he thinks that is right, just so he'll gain something or he'll have some kind of feeling of safety. And it's I wouldn't want to be him. It seems to me very, very difficult. But if anything, I admire this kind of integrity.
Yeah, integrity, and thinking about what you want, not getting distracted by others telling you what you should have, and then actually doing it. It's complicated.
And also there is something about him that is super competent. So it doesn't matter if it's something electronic or mechanical, or if it's computers, he can fix everything. So my mother now is going through dementia, and often when I ask her, like, I think it was beautiful, before I left, I asked her, do you know who I am? And she said, well, I know that I love you, and I know that you love me. Isn't that enough? And when I asked her about my brother, so she said, he's the great mechanic of the universe. And I think that it's such a great definition of him. It's basically this idea that he usually don't understand people. Like, I mean, he's the kind of guy that can fall, like conmen can really kind of con him easily because he believes people. But when something doesn't work, he can make it work.
Nice. What are your favorite names?
I love my son's name, Lev. Lev in Hebrew means heart. Mm-hmm. And when my wife was pregnant, she asked me how would I want to call our son, and I say I want to call him Lev. And the thought about it was that in Hebrew all the names have meaning. Like Etgar, my name is challenge. My brother's name is Nimrod, which means we shall rebel. You know, every name means something, and sometimes you have like names like the tall one and the kid is short, or the smart one and the kid is dumb. And there is something about heart, that a heart can be everything. You know, it can be soft, it could be hard, it can be brave. So I think that the fact that it's so open, and also that the word is so short, I really love short words.
That is a beautiful name, Lev. Yeah. What is it that you most dislike?
In the word?
Could be anything, yeah. Something you really dislike.
I really dislike this kind of older things that, you know, this idea that like a baby, child, grown-up, old man dying. I don't like the
Erik
order.
Erikson's idea of that we have a pattern, we go through these phases, or Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey.
So for me, like, you know, I would want us to be kind of those kind of, like, you know, how to say, firecrackers. Like, I would want us, you know, to get better, like, you know, to become like stronger and faster and smarter, and then explode. You know, I don't like the decline. I would, you know,
that actually would be better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually just more intensity, and then it's over.
Yeah, I think that there is something about the decline. Again, you know, I think that I can admire it from kind of humane perspective. You know, kind of like understanding and internalizing and reflecting, but from a selfish point of view, I would just want to kind of reach this point where I am at my peak and then be gone.
It's interesting. I just thought for a moment, the poet I really like a lot is Rilke, and spent a lot of time reading it and translating it. And he tragically, terribly died too young, really terrible, at 51, I think. But he never talks about old age, really. Yeah. He lived this really intense life. He lived a very, very intense life, actually. And somehow he didn't get around to doing the other part. So because I only know the completed works. I only know the first part. There's no later part.
Yeah, and you know, and if you think about it, like we live now in a world that let's say you kind of change your iPhone to a different model before it dies, before it grows old and die.
Right.
So we have this kind of idea of kind of having things and then changing them, you know, and we're doing it rapidly, and really, and this idea of us kind of being these cars that we keep driving it until we're out of fuel, you know, and it rattles and it kind of stops in this arbitrary place, you know. There is something, I accept it, but you know, but I'm saying if anybody would want to have my view about how we can improve things, then I would want it to be done differently.
What is your greatest regret?
I think that there are many things that I know now that if I could have shared with myself when I was young, I would act differently. I think that mostly it's in relationship between men and women, like in all the romantic things. I think that all my life I've tried too hard, basically harassing and scaring the women I was interested in. It's until I found my wife who's
What would you say to your younger self?
I would just say, like, chill, relax. You know, it's like kind of do whatever you're doing, but more slowly. You know, try to sweat a little bit less.
Yes.
You know, because I really feel that, you know, that this I think that for most of my life I had this kind of ethos that if you want something, if you try harder, it's gonna happen. And I think in human relationship, this is really what makes what stalkers are made of, you know. and I really feel that you know, if I would enjoy to be with a person, I would want to be with them all the time. And you know, and if I liked talking to a girl, I would call her, you know, 10 times a day. And I think there was beneath this kind of inability to see things from another person's perspective. You know, it's really, I remember that when I was a teenager, I came up with this amazing idea of hitting on girls, and it was that I saw myself at that age as a kind of a strong teenager. So I would come to girls and say to them that I bet them that if I hold them in my arms, I can guess how much they weigh. And the idea was that the moment I hold them in my arms, I'd be like this kind of fireman saving them from a burning house, and they will see that it's kind of nice to be held in my arms. But I never thought that, you know, that actually girls don't want people to guess how much they weigh, you know. So I think that this was kind of this idea that I was too much in my story. I think, you know, in my last collection, there is a guy who is a virgin, and he has sex with a girl. And after they have sex, he says to her, "Thank you." And I think that this is kind of reflecting of the kind of person that I was, like this idea that I say, "Oh my God, it feels so good. Wow, that's so nice of you." But the thought that actually it maybe feel as good to the other person kind of escaped me. So there was something kind of too self-centered and hyperventilating in me.
How would you like to die?
You know that in the TV series that we've made, then one of the characters says that I would like to die drowning in a swimming pool full of whiskey. But he's an alcoholic, you know. So, so
it's a terrible image. It sounds terrifying. Okay.
But I think that you know, those kind of fairy tales when somebody kind of dies with all the people that he loves around him, and he's saying kind of goodbye and kind of will himself to death, kind of just letting go, is something that I can connect to. You know, with my father, he had terminal cancer, and all the time like even when he was in his last day and he was in a hospital room, I remember, and there was a time during the day, I think it was around 3:00, that in the little windows that he has in his room, the sun would come and shine on his face, and would say, "Oh, it feels so good," and he would have this positiveness. And then one night, he said to me, "I can't take it anymore." And in the morning, he was dead. So I think that, it's not that I would want to, he suffered a lot, but, and I don't think that I have it in me, this ability to keep my positiveness while suffering. But this idea of saying, you know what, I'm done. To will myself to death.
You have another, in that book, The Good 7 Years, your uncle, Abraham or Avraham or something, who left yeshiva really young, and then the rabbi said, until you find back your way to the Torah, you will not die. So he lives this great life, and then you said at the end, though someone comes to him, a relative or something.
It's my father.
Your father, and reads Torah with him, so actually, and then he can die.
Yes, because the truth is that he was like in a coma, where the doctor said he's going to die in 12 hours, and he was in this coma, for a very long time. And my father, who knew the story, came and prayed next to him. And my father was not a religious person, but this kind of ideas that if he'll help him, return to religions, and he can finally.
He was released from that kind of sentence, right? Life as a sentence. What is your motto, if you have one? Like
a motto.
A motto, like a
motto.
What's the French? Is devise or something?
Yeah, I understand. The motto is.
If you have one,
I have to. Yeah, I'll think of one. A motto is. Shut up and listen. I'm saying I'm saying it's a motto that I say to myself because I tend to talk more than I listen. So I often say to myself, "Shut up and listen." And it's kind of, for me, shutting up is like kind of stopping my breath. It doesn't come naturally.
It's a nice motto, actually. It's quite important, I think, for today's age, especially when very few people shut up at all and no one listens at all. And I think that's it. So
great. It was great fun.
Yes, thank you so much. Actually, I'm going to think about all these answers now. So thank you, Edgar. And
we have to meet in, 6 years, 4 years, 20 years?
Oh, no, he did this sooner. Proust did it 2 years later. I think he revised his answers.
Oh, wow. The good thing about me is that I never remember what I say. It's funny because, when I look back at interviews, then the ones that I totally remember are only the bad ones. Because if I enjoy a conversation,
you don't remember,
that I don't remember what I said.
Well, Caroline was really regrets that she couldn't be here. But she's really looking forward to hearing this. And I want to thank you especially for making time between lots of traveling. Right? So thank you for being on the PROUST Questionnaire.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great.